I'm Dave Carey. Welcome to the August 17 meeting of the Barnstable Housing Committee. Really nice to have you here. We have a kind of an extended agenda this morning because we're going to talk with people from the planning board. But just to get going, I would like to ask if anyone is recording this meeting. Hearing none. Next, I would like to hear comments from the public, if there is anyone here from the public who would like to comment. Hearing none, moving right along here. New business, Affordable and Community Housing Roundtable. Discussion of partner roles and challenges to creating and preserving affordable and community housing. So how should we proceed with this?
Well, I was thinking we could invite our guests, Housing Assistance Corporation, Ruth Weil from the Trust, and Lori Fitton from BHA, just to give a brief introduction of their organization, their role relative to housing in the community.
Excellent.
And then we could open up to a dialogue on the challenges that they see on affordable and community housing in the town of Barnstable.
Let's do that. So who would like to begin? Who would like to begin?
See, okay. I'm Ruth Weil. I currently staff the Affordable Housing Growth and Development Trust Fund. It's a municipal affordable housing trust, but Barnstable never does anything simple or by the book. So instead, and I think it's relevant to today's discussion, under the statute that created the Municipal Affordable Housing Trust, there's an economic development component to it, but Barnstable is the only one who has really embraced the synergy between housing and economic development. So the trust was created in the town of Barnstable in the year 2007 through an order accepting the state statute, which is Chapter 44, Section 55C. The trust is a municipal entity, but with tremendous powers. It can borrow money, it can sell property, it can acquire property, it can even sell property to generate money, even if the property that they're selling is not for affordable housing. So it has a breadth of powers that you usually don't see in a normal municipal entity. Currently, the trust consists of 5 members: the town manager, the assistant town manager, the finance director, Laura Schufeld, who represents the affordable housing component, and Wendy Northcross, who recently resigned as head of the Chamber of Commerce. She does the economic development, and now she's going to be running the Kennedy Museum. So, we have a terrific, obviously a terrific board with a lot of different perspectives and a lot of financial acumen. The trust statutorily is categorically eligible for community preservation funds. The trust legislation was amended in 2016 to include that component. In its initial iteration, and it's still part of the state act, the trust can accept mitigation funds, and the original monies that initiated the trust, and Arden was involved, was money from a market rate housing development in Centerville, which gave $1 million in mitigation funds to jumpstart the trust. But the trust really needed a steady infusion of money. So in 2020, right before the pandemic, it was January 23rd, 2020, the trust received $2.5 million in Community Preservation Act funds, and the trust is applying for an additional $2.5 million, and that's before the council this Thursday, as it turns out. So one of the initial initiatives was with the Housing Assistance Corporation to do emergency rental assistance. At the time that the trust embarked on that, you didn't have any federal or state or county actors, but then a fusion of money came in, so the trust money wasn't utilized that much, which was good. That's how we structured it. The trust was going to be the funds of last resort. So the trust is also looking into, and I'm sure everybody's going to talk about, the affordability gap and the availability gap. The trust is looking for partners, really through the Mass Housing Partnership, to reduce mortgage interest rates, so that affordability gap can be bridged using CPA funds and in combination with funding from the Mass Housing Partnership to reduce interest rates. So in Boston, it was called the One Plus mortgage program, and that increased a borrower's buying power by about 150,000. So that's a huge
Yeah.
issue because the the CBDG, had a mortgage program, but it's very hard to fill that gap, particularly in the last, with the results of the pandemic. So I don't know if you want me to identify, Elizabeth, at this point, what I view as, the challenges. Is that
Ruth,
appropriate?
could I ask a question? So with the combination of authority and money, which is pretty rare for a municipal entity, this would seem to be dozens of directions you could go. How do you pick, with just a board of 5 people and essentially no employees and, no major organization or operations or anything, how do you make a selection of what to do with those resources?
Yeah, I want to take exception to no employees. I think Elizabeth's department, has been hugely
Supportive. Good.
And I've been working with the trust as well. So I think we have the employees. I think I'm glad you asked that question because it was in my notes and I ignored it. We are guided by the community preservation plan, which is a yearly plan that identifies
Yes.
housing needs.
Yes.
We are guided by the housing production plan, which is good until 2023, although I was looking at the census, information, and there are big changes in that, and I think we have to evaluate that. The town council has a strategic plan that, Councilor Hebert was involved in and can talk to. So we,
Okay, so that's guidance.
yeah, that's guidance, and, we use those various plans to, when the trust got that $2.5 million in 2020, the trust immediately issued a notice of funding availability and listed 3 or 4 categories of funding: development activities, pre-development activities, and trying to preserve existing affordable housing.
Okay, that's good, thank you. That was very helpful. Elizabeth, did you have something you want to
Go
ask?
around and do roles, and then we can.
Okay. Yes.
Hi, I'm Scott LaJoy. I'm the
Hi, Scott.
Government Affairs Director at Housing Assistance. We're a nonprofit based on West Main Street, but we service the entire Cape and the Islands, doing everything from rental assistance to housing production. We're the consumer education center for the region as well, so we have a lot of people who are coming in for first-time home buyer classes and such. And we've been working for years trying to help a lot of different segments of the housing market. And, it has been quite a challenge to try to meet those differing segments. We recognize that there's a housing crisis right now, and exacerbated by COVID, and we are working with our federal and state funds that we've been given to meet rental assistance needs in the area. We're also, and David will speak more on this as well, but constantly working on bringing up housing production and giving rental and buying options for people in Barnstable and across the Cape. There's more than a need forever now for attainable workforce housing as well. We've, for years, been ramping up production in our affordable housing, but because of the steep rise in median home price right now.
And Scott, could we just ask everyone, has anyone looked at a recent sales price? I mean, the prices are completely astounding at this point.
I think it was reported that the median for Barnstable was $515,000, and that may be just as of 2 weeks ago.
It was $550 in June.
$550.
Yeah, up from low 400s a year ago.
So how are my grandchildren going to buy a house?
Children.
They're buying a lot
How are we going to buy a house?
every week.
Well, that
no
sort
one
of
can buy a
segment
house.
of the population has been left behind. As the pricing has gone up, people who are making, anywhere up to $100,000 in household income a year probably just can't afford to buy a house here on Cape Cod. A single family house, they might be able to get into a condominium or townhome if they're lucky, but even those numbers, even when there is some availability, it's so low right now. The number of homes on the market at any given time, in June, month of June, inventory of homes for sale was only 110. That's compared to 260 the year before. So the listings are not there, the supply is not there. So and the demand, as you've read about, you all are well aware, the demand is very high. People want to be here, people want to come down here, and the year-round population are working oftentimes seasonally or as retirees and want to retire here, and they can, if they're trying to buy a home in a bidding war, they're not going to win. So I have more statistics here, but I want to kind of keep it moving.
Sure,
We can
great.
have
Thank you, Scott.
More discussion, and I can ask.
We appreciate
answer
that.
any questions.
Yes.
I guess I'll piggyback off of Scott since we're from the same organization. So I'm Dave Quinn, the Director of Housing Development at Housing Assistance Corporation. So my role is really to produce more housing. We recently just finished last year, right in the middle of the pandemic, 8 units on Ridgewood Avenue. If you haven't had a chance to take a look, it's a beautiful development, which was supported by this committee, the Housing Trust, and just sort of the town in general. And so I won't go into too much. I have a lot more, like Scott, I have a lot more information about sort of what I see as the biggest challenges are to housing. But I'll say that in general, this is a really, really challenging time to build new housing. Sort of all of the things that were constraining the market before the pandemic, the high cost of land, high cost of construction, the seasonal economy, challenges with zoning, all of those things are still in effect. And they're just really being exacerbated now, especially the cost of buying new land or real estate, and then also the cost of construction is just astronomical right now. So we do have a couple projects in the queue, none in Barnstable right now, but we are seeing pretty much every project that we look at has a really substantial gap that we need to go out and talk to committees like you all and state agencies and really try to fill that gap. And so that's really what the game is right now, is how do you bridge a larger gap than we had before? So it's something that all housing developers are faced with. And then we're also, just to kind of get at the home ownership question, we are looking to try to, we've been mostly focused on rental for the last couple of years, and we would love to be able to focus on ownership as well, affordable ownership. There is a state program through Mass Housing called the Commonwealth Builder Program, and it's a subsidy for affordable home ownership, and it can only be used in gateway cities or specific qualified housing tracts. So it's basically on the Cape Barnstable, and then there's one area, Falmouth, that qualifies as well. So that's something that we've been actively trying to find a location for, and it would have to be 20 units of, minimum 20 units of either single-family homes or condos for affordable ownership. So I just kind of throw that out there. We don't have a project, a specific project in mind yet, but it's something we've been kind of shopping around.
David, does your organization have a metric for how significant the problem is and how it's getting worse by the day with these price increases? In other words, what should we be looking at as housing becomes more and more unaffordable? Is it simply something like maybe area median income divided by the house price or something, or?
Yeah, that's a good question. Right now, we're actually in the middle of conducting a market study. It's a part of a larger project that we're actually doing in collaboration with the Association to Preserve Cape Cod. It's a mapping project that looks at all of the towns on Cape Cod and tries to identify where would be the most appropriate locations for housing and where the best locations for conservation are. A component of that is we're doing a housing study, so then sort of drilling down to identify for each town, what is that metric? It's exactly that question. So
Yes.
We don't know exactly what it'll be, but we've hired a consultant that we're working with to try to figure out if maybe it's a vacancy rate that we can track.
Yep.
I know the census data has vacancy rates, but something a little more local that kind of takes into account who are the big, the main landlords and operators of rental housing that we can sort of track moving forward. So I mean, for us, it's vacancy rate. It's looking at sort of how many units are on the market.
Okay.
how many people are coming through our door. You know, these are all things that we track, and sort of in the change in the demographic of the people that are coming through our door as well. And I know that's something Scott might have some more information on.
And the Cape was very slow to recover the pricing from 2008. When did that happen? Does somebody know? Is it like 2016 or something? But now it seems like it's doubled since then. So it's just ramping up so sharply. It's really crazy.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely been a huge influx of, of people buying homes from, who can work remotely. And I think, so you're kind of tapping into that Boston, New York professional market where people can work remotely. I think there's some positive things about that, but, the downside is that, they're able to outbid.
But if we're
local
housing
sellers.
advocates, we're working on the margins, obviously. We
Yeah.
don't have all that much funding and staff and so on and so forth, very limited resources. If prices double, and we were only able to address, 10% of the market or less, what are
Right.
we now down to, 2% of the market or something? I don't know. Anyway, all right, thank you, David. Anyone else? Lori?
Morning, my name is Lori Fenton. I'm the director at Barnstable Housing Authority. Housing Authority is a quasi-municipal agency. We receive grant monies, funds from both the federal and the state government. We currently have, over 350 units within the town of Barnstable. Included in that total are 50 single-family homes. Those run anywhere from 2 to 4 bedrooms. We're in all 4 corners of the town, and we're here to serve the citizens of Barnstable and provide them with safe, decent, and affordable housing. Some of my statistics are our residents run anywhere from just a few months old, and I think our oldest is 95 at this moment. We have in addition to the units that we own, we also manage and administer over 500 housing subsidies. That could be mobile Section 8s or state MRVP vouchers. There's been several programs that have been created out of Barnstable Housing Authority. One in particular is called DIAL, and that's for young disabled individuals. We had written a grant a number of years ago for 200 vouchers, and we split them with 2 other towns on the Cape, Falmouth and Bourne. So between the 3 of us, we have these 200 vouchers for the people, and they can only stay on the Cape. There's other programs, alternative housing vouchers. We have about 11 different programs that run simultaneously, in addition to our state and federal owned properties. All the rents are income driven. Rent for someone could be anywhere between 27% and 30% of their adjusted gross income. And right now, I did quick figures in my head. Average rent for any of our participants, whether it's a family or an individual, the average is about $350 a month, which is great, comparatively speaking.
That's very affordable, but you don't have enough to affect.
That's the subsidy portion of the rent, right? That's what the tenants pay.
That's what the
Well,
tenant,
that's
Yes,
what the tenants pay.
yes.
That's what I mean.
Yep.
If it was 350 everywhere, this committee wouldn't even have anything
Right.
to do. Everything would be
Right.
affordable.
No, but that's not the rent. The rent might be $1,500 a month, but the portion
The
they're
tenant's
responsible
portion.
for
Right.
is
I
$350.
know,
Everybody
but
else is
Right.
already
if
paying.
I move into
Based
an
on
apartment, I'm not concerned about what somebody else pays. I'm
Right.
concerned with what I pay.
Yeah.
So someone can move in there and they pay $350 a month.
If they
Based
have a
on,
voucher.
based
If
on
they
their
have-
income.
if they
yes.
have a unit.
That's-
Yep.
And if they have a
Yeah.
voucher.
If they have a
But
unit,
that's a
you're
good thing.
talking about 300 units shared, or something shared between.
Over 350, yes.
Shared between 3 towns.
No.
No, what did you say?
No, we own well over 350 units
But
within the
that's-
town of
But
Barnstable.
that's not enough.
Right.
They're all filled.
We also have over 500, you call them like consider them a coupon, and you can go shopping with these particular subsidy coupons. Does that make?
It does.
a
My
little-
husband was citizen housing and planning, so his whole life
Okay.
was housing. So that's why I'm here, because it's been the same for 50 years. Basically, not enough for any person at a certain income.
Right, now
And not in my backyard. It still prevails.
I also have a very sobering statistic. Housing authorities in the state are required to participate in a common housing application, which is known as CHAMP. So what that does for anyone applying for state housing, they can simply fill out one application and send it to whatever housing authority they choose to. As of Friday, there were over 8,000 people on our waiting list for state housing.
So there may be something,
350 that are occupied already.
when the house prices double, there may be something exponential going on here where it drives not twice as many people, but 12
Right.
times as many people.
Right, the
Anyway,
unintended
Yeah.
consequences, yes.
Thanks, Laurie.
You're welcome.
Elizabeth,
Thank
is there
you.
anyone else that we should hear from?
Well, I want to recognize Arden because she
Arden,
took our
good
time.
morning.
Arden was our housing coordinator for 10 years, so knows. sort
We
of
thought she looked familiar.
Yes.
knows some of the
recognize
local
her.
issues, I think, more acutely, and maybe she can kick off our discussion of challenges.
Yeah, I just also wanted to remind everybody the role that this committee could play. So the Housing Committee is advisory committee to the town and to the town council, but I think that it's really important that you educate the decision makers in the town. I think that's your main role is they're not all sitting at this table right now, so to share that information, advise them on strategies. So at your meetings, you can strategize about initiatives that the town might be able to adopt to attempt to solve this.
Yes.
And then you can advise the decision makers, work really closely with the Planning and Development Department as you have been, maybe SWAT some of the existing initiatives that the town has to help improve them, or decide where the effort and finances should go based on prior experience and how successful those are. There was a prior economic development subcommittee of the town council that was doing some of this work. They recognize that housing and economic development are intricately linked, and that has since been disbanded. So I think that this committee can really take up some of the work that they were doing, and actively advising, again, the decision makers to move some of these ideas into action.
So, Arden, one of the things that concern us and everyone is that we meet once a month, which is not a lot of meeting compared to someone that works a 40-hour week. Obviously, there's only so much we can get done. We know we're advisors. From time to time, we've looked back at what our charge is, and if I could, these are our authorities and responsibilities for our Housing Committee. The Housing Committee facilitates the coordination of the factors that affect. So first, we're starting off with 4 verbs or something, the actions we're going to take. Then we mentioned 2 items. So 2 doesn't sound like all that many. Equal access to housing. Well, that's a universe. And secondly, the development of affordable housing, and that's a triple universe. So if you were to diagram these 2 things, what is all the things affecting equal access? What are all the things affecting the development of affordable housing? There's thousands of items. So to use a maritime analogy, because here we are in Cape Cod, if we were going downwind in a square rigger and we were going to jibe, there's about 50 lines that have to be adjusted. We have 5 people on this committee, and we just feel like we're just going downwind without much opportunity to control. We don't feel great about not having a strong commitment. And we think if we meet with the other people that are on the same boat, maybe we could all coordinate together a little bit better and get a better feeling about, picking a course and then trying to get on that course and try to stay on that course. Because otherwise it feels like we're all just doing a lot of things, but this problem is getting worse so fast at this point that it isn't a great feeling when you sit on this committee for once a month and say, are we helping out or are we just going sideways? So do I go back to you, Elizabeth? Do you have kind of Is it something, and 14 of us are not going to accomplish anything today, we can be sure of that. But what we could do is start to work towards a little bit of an agreement among us about how we maybe coordinate better. What is the big picture? What does this diagram look like? What are the 6 things, maybe instead of 40 things we could approach? And I think the planning department is who we really need to look to at least kind of begin doing that.
I mean, I think that's great. I think sort of understanding where the needs are and where this committee can potentially influence those needs is a big task.
Yes.
But one hopefully we can at least start the discussion on today. And I don't know if maybe Scott or David have examples of how you work with other housing committees in other towns, and if there's any sort of interactions or models to build from.
And I think I'd just
Well, I
let it
just have
complete
one
a thought.
quick way
Yes.
to narrow that is focus on things a municipality actually can affect.
Yes.
You know, municipality can't do everything. There's a lot of roles that other organizations are playing. So maybe identify areas that a municipality can affect. You know, we can affect zoning. We can affect permitting. We can coordinate with our municipal trust in guiding them on what you see as need. But you know, you can certainly narrow where your influence
And maybe
can focus.
maybe that's why this price increase thing is so important, because you could say, let's say there's 20 items you need to control, one of which is capital in housing, obviously. If housing prices average $50,000, then capital is a relatively small item. If average prices are $500,000, it's 10 times as big, and at some point, the capital swamps everything. I mean, at some point, if you can't solve the money thing, there's nothing you can do except produce documents. So, I mean, that's what I'm getting concerned about, is the capital now is becoming so overwhelming. David, what was your cost per unit? And this is building units where kind of everything was more or less in your or our favor on the recent project.
Our cost per square foot, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but we were able to build the Ridgewood project very cheaply compared to what a lot of housing goes up for. So it was in the $250 to $275 per square foot.
And the private sector's saying like $450 now or something like that.
Right now, for just construction, so this is only the actual building cost, not
It's not buying the land.
not total development cost. Yeah, we're seeing pricing, you know, in the area of $350 a square foot.
Yeah.
And I know that a lot of the projects going to the state right now for funding are over $500,000 per unit for costs, which is, you know, something they haven't seen before. So I think a couple of years ago, people were alarmed when it was getting over $300,000 per unit. Now it's closing in on $500,000 a unit in terms of these
And
large
remember,
projects.
the land is what's really appreciating, right? I mean, I know lumber is up now. Lumber will probably come down. Labor is up. I don't know if it'll come down or not. We have a small workforce. But the land is what's really getting bid up. And we don't have any control over that. That's purely the market. So anyway, I don't know. No sense in belaboring this too much.
Yeah.
But this, I mean, it does say we need to coordinate our effort, and we should try to do that.
Yeah.
So, yes.
I think we need a playbook. We need to
Yes.
know, we need to know, you know, what your mission and
Yes.
and what yours are, what yours are. We need to, you know.
What is our piece of the puzzle?
And then we gotta know who we're gonna play with.
Yeah.
Basically, we gotta know the players on the football team, you know, or you
Yep.
can't really do it. I mean, we are advisory, but we're advisory to the town council and to the town manager.
Yes.
And if we can pick and choose some of these things, we might help you folks. and we're trying to help. We're not trying to be an obstacle. We're trying to help, but we need to know what everybody's position, mission, orientation is. And I just have one question for Ms. Weil. Hi. And I do trust. I don't totally like them, but was there a reason? Was there a reason that we decided to go to this trust format rather than just having another town department?
Because of the power, because
It's a
the
municipal
entity.
corporation,
Right.
but the trust comes under the municipal corporation, is that it?
Right, and it just, the power that the legislature gave the trust, I think, again, recognizing the crisis in affordable housing, it's a very nimble tool and it's a very powerful tool, and when it receives Community Preservation Act funds, it goes through the town council, Community Preservation Committee, CPC committee, and then the town council. But then every project can go through much more swiftly than rather than having every project go first to the CPC and then to the town council. So it can be more nimble.
You said legislators, so you're talking the state.
Right, yes, yeah, the state legislation. And I think that, that was the purpose of it, to provide, to David's point, another potential funding source. And it does accept mitigation money. Some projects, it's less prevalent now, but several years ago, a lot of projects were, market rate projects were paying a certain amount of mitigation. And those funds could go into the Affordable Housing Trust, as well as part of a project that the airport was involved in. The trust, in probably 2 or 3 years, is going to receive a more steady flow of money coming in based on the mitigation.
Is there any chance that donations to this trust would be tax deductible?
We never give, the town never gives tax advice, but it is.
No, I know.
Yeah, we can't.
We won't hold you to it, but, I have some clients that would be interested if they could deduct it. I don't know.
It is equivalent for tax purposes, this is all I'm gonna say, for tax purposes as a nonprofit. It has but everybody would have to consult their own accountant and their own financial advisors. That's the advice that the town has always given these sorts of.
So the trust can take action, they have money, they can sign contracts, so they could buy a property, they could say they want it to be affordable, they could put a specification, RFP together, put that out to developers, and then they control the development, so they can work very quickly, just like a real estate developer, whereas other municipalities are unable to do that. So that's very helpful, thank you.
And the trust could receive money from anywhere townwide, basically.
Yes.
I mean, if we recommended a tax policy or a fee policy that funded the Affordable Housing Trust, you could receive that fund.
That's a generic statement. Yeah, I would say yes generically with, it would depend.
Yeah.
Because there are constraints in municipal appropriations.
Okay, so Elizabeth, would you like to present something at this point, or just comment on where we're at?
No, I mean, I guess I would look to our guests to see if they have anything to add relative to support for their organization, or again, roles that potential roles and support that they could see the housing committee playing for their organization.
So the question then would be that we ask them, what is the best thing we could do to help you succeed with your mission?
Which ultimately is really, what is the best thing the town as the government agency
Yes.
can do to help?
Thank you. Good clarification.
Because that's really what we have control to give a policy recommendation to the council to say this is what housing in our community needs.
Right.
And one thing I just wanted to say, the house prices are up. We can't control that. We're not going to be able to change the market. So we have to figure out how we embrace that and how we make that, collect and redirect those funds. I think the transfer tax has been talked about a lot, and I think we need to almost make that an agenda item and figure out how we get someone in here to help us determine if that is a recommendation we should make to the council. That there is a transfer tax that either goes to the trust, goes to some sort of housing fund, or gets redirected through the property tax policy to support year-round or workforce housing. But I think we should ask them to, yes, give us some recommendations or things that we could do as the town to help the organizations.
So why don't you assume we did ask you that? Your answer is, do you want to start, David?
Sure, yeah, I mean, that's a big question. I mean, I would just say, for me, the biggest challenges are money.
Money and money?
Money and permitting.
Okay.
And permitting, meaning most properties we look at are not, are not in a location where we could buy, right, build at the scale that we would want to build at. So we'd have to go in for at least a special permit, potentially a regulatory agreement, and go through a longer permitting process.
And your model is to build, own, and operate?
Yes.
Okay, so that's important, that you would be the owner of the property.
Yeah, for our rental properties, yeah,
Yes,
exactly.
good, thank you. Scott?
I would say that permitting is to be involved in, as you update your local comprehensive plan, we look at some zoning issues that would help, not only our organization, but rather everybody help to develop housing, private builders, private developers, to be able to build housing, because it's if we keep doing what we're doing, David's department keeps doing what he's doing, that's great. We reach the people that are that qualify for that median income rate.
Mm-hmm.
But what we're missing is that what's been called the missing middle, is that the segment of the market just a little bit above, and where town council passed the ADU bylaw just a few weeks ago. So we've taken a few steps to change sort of the zoning, but we need to think creatively about changing the zoning across Barnstable and across Cape Cod, so we're not just simply single-family homes.
Mm-hmm.
We look at how different we are from the state of Massachusetts, and in our single-family home makeup, we're way above, and that's to meet the need of all of these people who want to buy second homes, to retire here. But what we need to do is we need to figure out how to bring up multifamily housing, and that's through zoning changes.
Good, thank you.
And it seems to me that it should focus on rental units. I think there's more need for rental units here for the workforce, for the people who actually are in the income level. And those should be multi-units, not just one single condo placed out in some spot. I really believe it's the rental that the people can't afford, $1,400 for a one-bedroom apartment. They don't even exist. So instead of buying, it's more renting. These people cannot buy at their income level. It's not possible.
Or maybe you can
Yeah.
talk about our housing needs assessment. and how
Yeah,
it talks about
the
that.
housing needs assessment did say that, but again, it's a little old at this point, and the pandemic has thrown everything askew. So, there was more of an opportunity for market rate home ownership with a little bit of assistance 6 or 7 years ago. That has definitely changed. So our stock definitely needs a rebalancing with rental, but I think we do need to offer some people opportunities for ownership to participate in that wealth building opportunity of home ownership.
Ruth?
And there has been a recognition that and this is my personal opinion, not the opinion of the trust, that over the decades, government policy, lending policy created a lot of racial inequality in home ownership opportunities, and this created the disparity of wealth disparity between people of color and white people, to be perfectly honest. And it was a multiple decade, because of the redlining, the funding for the Federal Housing Administration, it was very difficult for people of color
Mm-hmm.
to participate in that program. And there's been all sorts of books that have come out recently. So the program that I was talking about, the Mass Housing Partnership Program, is trying to target people of color to get them in the home ownership market, because that's where most of us have our wealth to give to our children. So I appreciate what you're saying, and rental housing is always a huge need, particularly for people who are making minimum wage. You obviously can't, it's difficult for home ownership.
They have a chance to save something, to be able to buy something at some point.
But I think we have to also focus on home ownership opportunities and to create a diverse housing stock. And I think the ADU passage is one step towards that. I know members of your committee have been talking about the small house movement. I mean, we have to look at more diversity in our housing types. I hate to give my age. My mother would never give her age. But I have been I started on the Cape as a legal services attorney in 1980. And at that point, we were talking about low-income housing, and there was a lot of animus toward that.
Yeah.
And then it became subsidized housing, sounded a little more sanitized, and then it
Not
became
affordable.
Then affordable.
Then workforce.
Then workforce.
Now we're just gonna call it housing.
But no, but
Yeah.
I think this pandemic, I'm an optimist, I'm always a glass half full person. I think this gets to what the role of the housing committee. I think there's an acknowledgement that the Cape and Barnstable in particular doesn't only want biodiversity, but we want economic diversity, and we're not going to achieve that until we address the housing crisis. So I think the zoning changes, Elizabeth and I have talked about maybe a housing development agreement to make it more, that's a flexible tool, the development agreement. There are zoning changes in the pipeline that are going to, make it, to David's point, less daunting to, develop multifamily housing. But we do have to look at a mix, The ADUs are an important step, but those are small units. It's not going to, address the house. There's no panacea. You have
Yes.
to have, I hate this phrase, a lot of tools in your toolbox in order to, to do that. But I think the housing committee could be the spokesperson or the what is the politically correct? Could
Individual.
speak about, those issues in a way, focusing on potential zoning changes that make it easy for affordable housing and advocating before the
Yes.
council on those sorts of changes, supporting some of Elizabeth's efforts and, the planning department's efforts in that regard. But I am generally optimistic. I think I do believe that, everybody across the spectrum, the council certainly has been painfully aware of the housing crisis and has been trying to address it in the last year. I'm trying to say the pandemic, some good things that could come out of the
Yes.
pandemic is, some of those issues.
Thanks, Ruth. Laurie, would you like to, any closing comment about?
Absolutely.
Good.
Our challenges, because
Yes.
I do have some smaller
And how we could
parcels.
coordinate with you to do
Yes.
things.
As everyone was talking, I agree with bits and pieces of everyone here. I circled money, of course, on my little notes. The regulations, as Ruth was just saying, regulations can make it pretty tough. The amount of hoops that a developer has to jump through in order to get a project moving along, and the time it takes. What I think would be very helpful is, again, going back on what you had said, Ruth, is to have the town consider all kinds or alternate types of housing. I had read in the minutes someone at the last meeting brought up tiny houses or small houses. I think
Yes.
you have to look at, they've been very successful in other communities throughout the state. And is there a particular reason why Barnstable won't entertain that? That's it in a nutshell.
Thank you, Laurie.
You're welcome.
Just one question for both of you. How many parcels do each of organizations own that are undeveloped or unoccupied? Basically undeveloped in the town?
Housing Authority
Yeah.
owns probably 15 or 20. They're not like large parcels, but a number of them are wet, and they cannot be built on anyway.
You could build more on
What you have?
what we already own, potentially, infill.
Yes.
I just have one
David.
other comment. Just listening to everybody, I think everyone's comments are great. The committee could also get involved in supporting specific projects, I think would be another way. I don't know if that's within, either individually or as a committee. And then to kind of piggyback off Scott's point, I think this could be even projects that don't necessarily fall into the capital A affordable realm. I mean, this could be workforce housing projects or market rate projects. I think in general, we're dealing with a supply issue, so perhaps the committee could look at projects and take a vote to decide whether they want to support them as the projects go through a permitting process. That goes a long way for a developer when they're going through any kind of permitting. We have projects around the Cape that are supported by the town or even on town-owned land, and we still get a ton of opposition sometimes when we go to these zoning board of appeals meetings from abutters. And so even though a lot of the projects that we do have great support from the town, there still is the need for that advocacy and getting people out to the meetings to support these projects.
So, Elizabeth, what about that? We're advisors, but if a developer wanted to come to us and say, here's a project, would it be appropriate for us to write to the counselors and say, we think this is a good project?
I think so. I mean,
Good.
again, that's your role, advisory, and if I do recollect, I think we have done that in the past.
Sure. You've supported developers, supported their request for funding at CPC.
Right.
You actually are the signatory on local initiative program applications. So that's, to get units onto the state subsidized housing inventory. There's a process, and this housing committee is our local housing partnership. So you're the first signatory on that
Good.
request.
But by the time you get to that level, to send a letter, it's already a pre-done deal. It's pretty damn close to a we have to be more creative than that. More to follow. I know Gordon wanted to say something.
Earlier in the
Earlier
procedure.
on, yeah.
Earlier, right?
Attend meetings.
Well, I think it speaks of part of the process, because one of the other hoops has been the contractor, the developer, has to come to many committees, the Historic Commission, and this committee, and that committee. And then they come here, and they're kind of saying, we've got, permission here, and so they're very, very close. And we're kind of this committee is kind of the cherry on the top of the sundae. By the time we get it, the council figures everything's been kind of reviewed and reviewed and reviewed. But that hasn't really helped the developer. You're gonna give them a positive feedback, and we're gonna go with a thumbs up. So, my feeling is like, we have to get past, and I guess some of the comments, but we have to get past to creating something very, very new here and very fresh, which has some ideas on that.
Thanks, Paul.
Thank you.
Yes.
My question was maybe about Ridgewood, was what kind of exact zoning changes would help? I mean, is it density? I mean, is that the basic one?
Sure, yeah, so that project was in a single-family zoning district.
Right, okay.
But it was within the growth incentive zone, so we had the option of coming to the town for a regulatory agreement, which was great. But I think, I'd say most projects we look at around the Cape are in single-family zones, and a lot of, in most areas, don't have that regulatory agreement process, so there may be no other way to get it done except for a 40B permitting process, so.
It's also on sewer, right?
On sewer, that was a huge benefit of that location, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So, sewering is great. That takes a little bit longer to put together than a zoning change, but in terms of timeline, to sewer a new area.
So you think a housing development agreement process would be, basically a regulatory agreement process that reached further into the town would be?
I don't know. I mean, I think in the Ridgewood case, if we didn't have that process, we would have done it as a 40B. So I guess there's always sort of that option. Yeah, I don't have a specific zoning recommendation, but.
By right.
Oh, by right would be great, yeah. I just know the town, the town's already doing a lot of planning on zoning, so I'm not totally up to date on that, but, yeah, and I mean, in general, if it's by right, you just go get your building permit, so.
Yes.
That would be the best.
I heard you say something interesting. When you asked Lori how many units were available, you said something like 15 spaces, but you can't build on that land. Oh, and you said.
A number of them, yeah.
Then you said, well, we need to change the appearance of what we have. But if you have a structure, maybe you could make it more multi-structure.
Yeah.
And that, to me, is the fastest way you can get some things done.
Thanks, David. So obviously, we're limited in time and kind of ability to drill down in such a complex topic. What we wanted to do is have you come in and talk to us, which we've done, which we appreciate. Elizabeth, is there something else we should do here? We do have our old business to cover this morning. And do we want to stop here? And then our guests, if they wanted to leave, they could do that, or how should we say that?
That's fine, unless they have anything else.
And if you'd like to stay for the remainder of our meeting, that's great. We probably have 10 or 15 minutes of other things to cover. If you'd like to leave now, that's fine. This is hopefully this is the first of our attempts to get a better understanding of how we can coordinate with the different town departments and with the different developers. So thanks very much.
Yeah, I'll just say that I think we started to brainstorm some great actions, and that was the idea of this conversation, and it's helping to figure out what the role is and how we can best
Good.
use that, so very helpful.
Thank you. All right, let's turn to old business, and I think Elizabeth is going to help us learn a little bit more about existing projects.
Thank you, David.
Do you want to share that survey with the group or with the public somehow?
The survey?
The survey you guys are doing that you sent out to like stakeholders and such?
Oh, that was a part of the market study that we're doing?
Yeah, I just didn't know if you wanted to
Yeah, so,
distribute it
so
through
that,
the network.
yeah, so that was a landlord survey, that's being conducted by our consultant. I'll have to check, so I don't know, I think we're probably gonna, in September or so, that project
Mid-September, I
will be
think
done,
it'll
and
be
we'd
done.
be happy to share the results.
I just didn't know how you were reaching out to housing advocates and housing people. I didn't know if through the housing committee, if you wanted to try to.
Yeah, for that, what we're trying to do is target landlords to get a sense of how many units they have, what they're, what they're charging, what their vacancy is, things like that. So, yeah, I'd be interested to talk to you about how to get that out. But yeah, maybe through this committee, I don't know.
Just offering it as a way.
Okay.
Elizabeth?
I have misplaced my agenda, but if I remember correctly.
Let me pass one down. So it is updates on new housing development in the permit process.
Great, yeah, so I thought this would be just a good time to keep the board up to date on what we have, the housing production that we have from private sector partners. Thank you so much, Councilor Hebert, I appreciate it. I will not lose your notes.
Hey, Kathleen, so she
Oh.
still-
It's the minutes.
They're the minutes.
I will not lose them. The project that I think we have that's advancing most quickly right now, and I think I touched on this briefly, but just so you all know where it's at, is the proposed development by New England Development in partnership with a national multifamily builder called the Hanover Companies. They are purchasing 35 acres approximately from the Cape Cod Hospital at the corner of Wilkins and Addicks Lane in Barnstable, and they are seeking to do mixed-use development in that location with a housing component. At a minimum, the initial phase of the project includes 272 proposed rental units. They're saying these are market rate rental units. They are proposing to comply with the inclusionary affordable housing ordinance that the town has, which requires 10% of those units to be deed restricted affordable at 65% of the area median income. In terms of permit process, there are two different entities with jurisdiction, the town and the Cape Cod Commission, so they need permissions from both of those agencies. Currently, they are pursuing a zoning change with the town. They have proposed to create essentially a new zoning overlay district to permit the mix of uses that they are proposing on those parcels. Essentially, it's a very permissive zoning district today. It's zoned it's zoned industrially, and our industrial district permits, again, a very, very wide range of uses, including multifamily affordable, multifamily development. But in order to do that development, you have to comply with very specific sort of bulk and dimensional and density standards that are in the code, which only permit development at a rate of maybe 8 units per acre. So they are seeking essentially two things: a zoning change to permit additional density to get to those 272 units, and additional height, 4 stories to get to that additional density. So, among some other tweaks, including a slight reduction in parking requirements, essentially, those are the big things.
And have they indicated they'll go beyond the 275 units at some point?
Not at this point.
Okay.
And so the way the zoning is written, and it gets a little messy, the way the zoning is written is that those 272 units, should the zoning change, could pass at least through the town process as of right, should they wish to go beyond that. And they've talked about potential like senior or assisted care facilities in conjunction with the hospital. Those would have to go through a special permit process.
Yep.
With the town, because certainly we know we have this on the table, but we don't. There's other land there. There are essentially 2 other out parcels, and the idea that the town would at least have the ability to permit those through that special permit process. I will note importantly that the development also has to go through the Cape Cod Commission for regulatory review as well. Any development over 29 units has to go through that Cape Cod Commission review, with the exception of things like the growth incentive zone. So they have an existing development agreement with the hospital. Originally, they were going to build out a big campus there. So they're seeking to modify that development agreement with the Cape Cod Commission. And through that, they have to show that they're responding to the Cape Cod Commission's regional policy plan. So there is an opportunity as part of that conversation to talk about things like the potential for additional affordability in that development. So those are that's probably the hottest project that's going through the permitting
Elizabeth,
process
just
right now.
Ballpark, you don't have an estimate, do you, of how many new ownership and rental units are being brought online per 12-month period now compared to 10 years ago? I mean, is it twice what it used to be, 10 times, or?
I mean, I would say exponentially greater. I mean, we were doing a handful of projects here or there.
And now we're over 100 units, over 200 units a year coming online?
Yeah, I'd say we're doing about 100 units.
100 units a year, 12-month period.
at this
There
point.
hasn't been any housing, any single-family, no, home ownership projects that have any affordability requirements related to them, other than a
Yes.
scattering of habitat.
But just in general, units coming online, new units that are either ownership or affordable, is the number's way up at least.
We have to look at the net. We have to remember, we still.
Oh,
have
'cause
to-
we're losing-
losing
Yeah.
the same amount, I think.
Okay.
I don't think we're netting very many.
Losing them
We need
to-
You know,
Losing them to,
second homeowners.
Yes.
To, you know, investors, wherever they're going.
because if it goes to a second homeowner,
Know that data. It'd be
Yeah,
great if we knew
good.
that data somehow, and maybe Cape and Islands
Great point,
Association of
great
Realtors
point.
can give us a little metric of how
Yeah.
many of their sales are
Yeah, I know.
tenants getting the boot.
Yeah, I know when the Cape Cod Commission did their housing study a few years ago, and I think they're looking to update that housing study right now. They had some figures in there that were
Good.
that were very eye-opening about the going backwards. But that's a nice. It's particularly with this project through that Cape Cod Commission development agreement process. That's a way to ensure that those rentals become year-round. So I do think that's probably the biggest one we have coming through. I will say something else we're seeing is we are seeing a lot of requests for reuse of existing buildings and structures that had other commercial or office space uses into new
Converting to
residential-
housing.
Converting into new multifamily housing. I think honestly in the past week, I've probably seen a half a dozen come across
Wow.
my desk. It's enormous, and people are looking for more. I think it's construction costs are so high. I think people see the demand
Yeah.
for housing, and the office market is weak. So it's this sort of perfect storm of finding the opportunity to be able to add to our housing stock through an infill development perspective and using our existing infrastructure. And that's one of the reasons why we're trying to move the zoning changes that we've proposed in downtown Hyannis forward, because they were really aimed at this idea that regulating housing on a units per acre on a units per acre basis doesn't work in an infill
Yeah.
setting when you have existing structures on existing property, and so we had a public meeting on that I think 2 weeks ago, and are working
Okay.
at moving that towards a first reading at council.
And Elizabeth, you were going to tell us about the housing coordinator and the...
Land development
Yes,
real quick.
please.
So, to Councilor Hebert's point, can we get New England Development to come in here and present the project to us and the regulatory agreement to us, so that we can help in the negotiations of what goes to council? Because I see an opportunity here to say, you know, in this reg agreement, we want more units, or let's shift the requirements so they're not all 65, because our community does not require 65% AMI units. We better off to have 40 units, you know, 20 of them at 100% AMI. Like, I think, and we should have the expertise to be able
Good idea,
to
Jake.
make the recommendation
Yes.
to council. This is what
Yep.
the reg agreement should be from a housing perspective. We need to be the advocates in the reg agreement for housing.
I think that's a great idea, and I think we can make that request. And I think sort of following on that, you know, again, they're at this point, they are proposing to comply with our ordinance. If we feel like our ordinance is not being reflective of what our community's needs are, then we should have those. Then we should have those discussions as well. But I will absolutely make that request of the developer.
I think they've got 10% that's affordable, but the other 90, I think, are not
Yeah.
close to being affordable.
Yeah, they're
Yeah.
calling
I
them
mean,
luxury.
would you call
Yeah.
Everly affordable housing? I mean,
No.
Yeah.
The
is
not
it-
the
is
market
it-
rate units.
Is it market rate unit? No.
They're affordable, there are affordable units in
There
there
are.
because of the inclusionary ordinance, but the market rate units are nowhere near
Nowhere.
attainable.
They're not market rate, I mean,
They're too
they're
high.
not market rate units because half of them are empty, but I still worried that we're missing the middle there.
Yeah, and 65% AMI isn't, we don't need all those units necessarily, we might need some, but I think there's a balance of a mix of maybe we have some at 80, some at 100, because it just makes a better blend.
So my worry is that the next town council meeting, they're gonna ask to pass the zoning change, and if we pass the zoning change, we lose any leverage we ever had. It all goes to the Cape Cod Commission. It's a done deal for the town. It's by right if we pass that zoning change.
So it's not a regulatory agreement if the zoning change is fully approved?
We don't,
It's not a regulatory agreement, it's a zoning change, and then it's a development agreement with the Cape Cod Commission. And I would say the town has a voice in that. Certainly, I think if the town took a strong position with the Cape Cod Commission that this was important to them, I feel confident that that would resonate on the commission level.
Thank you. So the housing coordinator, we might have a new housing coordinator, but they can't find housing. That's not gonna happen. Okay, next topic.
It's gonna move in with me.
Very good. Elizabeth?
We do have a new housing coordinator. I'm very pleased to announce that we have hired Ryan Bennett as our new housing
Oh,
coordinator.
excellent.
She is currently the town planner in Brewster. So she lives here on the Cape already and has done great things with housing in Brewster and was looking to sort of focus her passion on this issue into a new opportunity. So
Excellent.
we're very pleased to welcome Ryan. She starts, I believe, the second week in September.
Very good, thank you. Anything else on that, Elizabeth? Those are the two topics we had for old business.
That is all I have to add. at this
Good.
point. Thank you.
Next is the approval of the minutes. I move that we approve the minutes from July 20. Is there a second?
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Hearing none, unanimous. The next meeting date is the third Tuesday of September. Does someone know what that is?
If I can get people out of my house, I'll know what month it is.
Bring them along. Kate, you can figure that out. It's the third Tuesday, that's our thing, right?
They're a Tuesday.
Are there any items not reasonably anticipated 48 hours in advance of the meeting? No, none here. Does anyone have any item that's not reasonably anticipated?
Elizabeth, can you give us a quick update on 200 Main? Could 200 Main become, if the Steamship Authority decided not to purchase it, could that be put out for a housing property?
So there's that big caveat on there, obviously, but in case you guys didn't see, the town is looking, is starting to have discussions with the council and others about renovating the Armory building right here in our backyard and the potential disposition of the 200 Main Street property on the corner of Main Street, East Main Street, and Yarmouth Road. We've taken a look at that building from a housing perspective just in the past to brainstorm exactly that opportunity. I do think it has strong potential for housing reuse. It has a very big second floor on it, and it was built as a lumber company, so it was certainly built to last, and it has a lot of structural integrity in it.
So it would just be a matter of if the Steamship Authority waived their rights there, then the town could look at.
Yeah, I mean, as we saw with, as we've seen for a long time, and certainly when we had our conversation with the community about housing zoning, I mean, housing and parking are intrinsically linked together. And in Hyannis, we know it's even more complicated because we have this external pressure for parking for the ferries that needs to be accommodated as well. So I mean, yeah, there's definitely going to have to be discussions about how that ecosystem works together to help meet those demands in a way that I think supports downtown and supports this idea of sort of rebuilding our urban form on East Main Street that we've been focusing on, as well as trying to find a way, you know, to again serve the needs of the transportation needs that we have here regionally in a way that doesn't overburden our transportation infrastructure.
It's exhausting just sitting here.
It really is.
It's exhausting
Yeah.
because it's round and around and
Like-
around we go.
Organizing the flakes in a snowstorm.
But I mean,
Flakes are all
to
over.
that end, I think we've seen a lot of really great articles, at least over the past couple of weeks, on housing. We can certainly pass those on to the Housing Committee, so you can stay up to date not only on town matters, but on conversations that are happening around housing.
Keep myself abreast of it, and I'm just very overwhelmed by this merry-go-round that I've been on since I came to Barnstable. And prior to that, I lived in Arlington, Virginia. Prior to that, I lived in Needham, Mass, and it's been going on and on. It's critical. You have a building across the street that's on sewerage. I've always said, well, you're not on sewerage, you don't have the right zoning. Go for it. Just put some units in there so some poor souls can have a decent place to put their head down in the evening.
Thank you, Paul.
It's just
Yeah,
a mess.
Don.
I'm just gratified that there's so many intelligent people that are working on this. It's an insurmountable problem. If we made any progress, I don't know. But the good thing is we're trying.
Yes.
You don't
We
give
need to
up.
go
You
to
don't
the
give up.
Town
It
council,
takes
know the meetings.
another
and
20
attend
years, so what?
And
You know, we're doing something.
speak at
And
those meetings.
the old starfish thing on the beach, you
Yeah,
know?
right?
You know, you can't save them all, but if you save one, that's
Yes.
great.
Meetings are
You get somebody in a housing, you get a family that's here
coordination.
that can stay.
definitely.
You know, the kids and the grandkids don't have to go off Cape. And that's what they have to do now. I mean, you've got to get somewhere close to Boston to make any salaries. It's terrible.
Well,
Anyway.
Thanks, Don.
Well, I just want to throw in, and I know things get complicated. For instance, we don't all know what the lease is on 200 Main Street, but somehow the authority has control of it, and it's leased to us for 99 years. The latest that I heard, but we'd have to look at that deed, right? So if the steamship authority takes it, we're going to be looking at a parking lot, most probably. We would be much better served, you know, at the end of that street, when you get to Main Street, there's a nice sign that says, "Welcome to Historical Hyannis." And if you're gonna turn to the right and see a parking lot, you know, as a visitor, I'd say, well, maybe we're gonna go a little further down Cape or someplace else, because it's
I go to Boston and see
I
parking
can
lots.
see the parking lot, right? So, and that's not saying we don't need a parking lot, but not at that corner. And I think about Falmouth, it was the Falmouth Housing Trust that helped Bob Murray before he passed. As you're going into Falmouth, there is a huge structure, and it's commercial downstairs, very nicely, and I think it's at least two stories of apartments up top.
700 Main Street.
Yeah, and it's a beautiful entryway to downtown. I'd love to see something like that for us in Hyannis. But then I think it also then comes down to money. So I've been working with a group in Virginia. They have a mix between nonprofit and for-profit. But one of the keys that I'm looking at are the investment groups which want tax credits for going solar or renewable and housing, they want those tax credits, and then they want a return on their investment. And so if we work with public, private, nonprofit, and non-government organizations, I think that's how we work together to bring that kind of funding into our community. And I'm gonna go with the rental, because my family is okay today because we lived in a little shack, literally, and we were able to pay that off. And then, because we weren't giving money to the bank every single month, we were able to save and invest in our future. So I think the quickest way to creating wealth for people who are working all the time, you know, at minimum wage, they need to have a place that they can live at that's not more than that 27% of their income. And the rest they can save with, they can throw into the economy, and everything works a lot better. And therefore, I believe one of the non-government groups that I want to participate in investing in this are the businesses. Because if we're all sitting around this table trying to figure out how we're going to keep an employee in town by getting them some inadequate housing so that they can work at such and such a restaurant for 40 hours, 50, 60 hours a week, and never get ahead, and then just be afraid that next time the rent's going to go up, then I feel like just working for the businesses, nothing against businesses, but we all have to work together, and everybody's got to carry some of the load to make sure that our people are adequately taken care of, and we're not just warehousing our employees.
And Cape
Thanks, Paul.
Cod Healthcare is a business
That's correct.
and should be considered in the pool of the necessity to, A, help out with housing.
Paul, do you think it would be appropriate for us to get involved in helping support the CWMP as a committee, as an integral part of housing production?
But I think it's integral, and
Yeah.
there's no doubt
So I
about
just don't
it.
know if at some point in the process of you guys sort of trying to market the support of that program and the way it's gonna be funded, that we get involved to just give support or whatever we do.
I would look at my colleague, it certainly wouldn't hurt if this committee made a statement
And I guess I'll certainly jump in and say this idea between managing growth and housing needs and environmental needs and climate needs and infrastructure needs is the big question that I think we're going to have to tackle as we update our new local comprehensive plan. That local comprehensive plan is supposed to be our guide to growth and managing growth in our community, and growth that's smart and meets our housing needs, but also protects our environment and builds on our wastewater capacity. So if we're going to expand our CWMP, which is absolutely integral to supporting new growth in this community, we want to make sure that we're anticipating that growth and we're planning for that growth and we're regulating that growth in a way that produces the needs that I think we've talked about here today, as well as the needs, the broader sort of environmental needs of our community. So we certainly encourage you guys to follow that process and get involved with that process, because I think that question right there, Jake, is really going to be the core thing, one of the core things that we try to address.
Can I just
Go
add
ahead,
one
yes.
statement to that? You know, we're in a unique position where, you know, we have stock. We have a lot of stock. It's just not being used in the way that we need it to be used. So in order to balance that environmental concern of new development, you know, maybe the initiatives need to be in converting some of that seasonally used units into year-round units.
Yes. Thanks. Well, at this point in the meeting, I usually ask if there are any final comments, but I'm too smart to do that today. So I would like to move that we adjourn. Is there a second? Hearing a second, all in favor? Anyone opposed? No one opposed, oh. There you have it. Excellent meeting, thank you very much.
Yes, yes.
Take care, David.
Coming, it's,